Old School Bodybuilding Clothing Company. If it's been 3.5 hours since you last ate protein and now you're starting to freak out, you are old school. If watching someone sit on a hammer machine for 5 minutes between sets playing with their phone pisses you off, you are definitely old school. OSBBC.com for the hardest training athletes.
Episode of Live with Dave Palumbo. As always, I'm going to be your host, Anthony Pasquale. And if you're new to this segment, we basically bombard you with random questions that I selfishly come up with of topics that I want to talk about. So, Dave, how you doing? We survived the hurricane, so we're back to normal over here today.
You look like my Uncle Vinny with that mustache, I got to tell you.
Well, this is the true story here is I shave my face now once a week with hair clippers. And when I naturally shave my face on one side and then do the other. And a lot of times I just shave half of it and do like a Harvey Two-Face. And as I got to the mustache yesterday, I was like, I'm just going to leave it. And then I was like, shit, I got to do a YouTube thing with Dave. And people are going to be like, who's this tool with the mustache?
I think mustaches are back in style. Like Chris Bumstead had one last year's Olympia, right? And
well, remember even like you even said it to me. I remember 8 years ago when we were prepping me for USA's, and I had the mustache and all the pictures. You're like, you look like Tom Selleck.
You do look like Tom Selleck. You look exactly like him. Yeah. And if you lost a little weight, you probably look like Ray Mensa, you know?
Yeah, that would work. Yeah, I'd be getting a lot of ass if it was 1975, you know?
Mustaches are in, I'm telling you.
Yeah, mustaches and skinny jeans. We can't do skinny jeans.
No, so. My father had a mustache my whole life practically, and when he one day he shaved it, I didn't even recognize him. It was like that was just like my image of my father. I never saw him without a mustache, and but it works for some people. Like some people don't look good without the mustache, you know.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, some people have a certain look. Yeah. They can only look a certain way. Yeah. No, that's very true.
I always felt like mustaches made people look more intimidating, a little meaner looking, you know?
Totally. Yeah. It's always like I always said. It's like if you have a son and you name him Carmine, by default, the kid, he's not going to be a wimp. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's a good name. You know? Carmine. It's like, did he go to jail?
Carmine looks like he busts legs on the weekends, you know?
Yeah, he's going to do shady stuff. Like, oh, my boyfriend's name's Carmine. Everyone's going to be like, oh, this is going to be good. I can't wait to meet him.
Yeah, that's right.
So one of the questions I wanted to start with for you today was, and a lot of people are new to the channel, but have been following you a long time, a lot of people as well. I know, obviously, you've done fish. You've done cat breeding, snake breeding. Yeah. You've done a lot of stuff that I'm not even thinking of right now. In Florida, do you still have a lot of plants around your property? Like, you into plants anymore? Or like, what do you have going on for plants in your home or on your property that you like?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm big into plants. I have a lot of trees, but you know what? I really didn't water them that much, and we had a really dry winter, and a couple of them, I lost a couple. But around my garage, Tyler sees it all the time, I put like my seedlings and my little clippings and stuff like that. And I have like cacti growing, and I have all my fruit trees in pots that I'm growing up from small little either seeds or little clippings. And it's funny because the ones in pots do way better than the ones in the ground. And I don't know, aside from like the big fruit trees, like I have mango trees on my property, some avocado trees, but I think because I water them every day. Plus the soil is not great so you have to fertilize a lot in Florida. And for some reason the citrus trees do horrendous in the ground because the bugs get them. In pots by my garage, it's amazing. It's like I have I almost have a greenhouse like right outside my garage.
I forgot because of several months ago, I think it was a pineapple. Did you get your first pineapple you took an Instagram video with?
I got pineapples, but there's another plant that's like a red pineapple, but it's not edible, that one. And I just actually I have some pineapples now. Once again, they're not edible, but I'm going to take them and I'm going to like make more of them because they look cool, you know, even though you can't physically eat them. We produced mandarins. I actually produced my first. I had planted in a pot a blueberry. I don't know if you even knew this. There's red blueberries.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I produced a couple of them. They taste really sweet. They're really cool looking. They look pink almost. They're like pink blueberries, and they're really cool. I did those, and I'm always planting some. I have a little planter also out there. I'm always putting stuff in there, and I eat red potatoes and purple potatoes. I think we talked about this in one of the episodes. So I took the purple potatoes and I planted them in the planter, like buried them in the soil, and I forgot about it. And I saw sprouts coming out of them and stuff like that. Sometimes, if you leave them in your house too long, they start sprouting. I threw them in the soil. Instead of throwing them in the garbage, I threw them in the soil. And they grew branches and stuff like that, and I forgot about them. And then I said, one day I was like kind of just like playing around with the soil, and a potato popped out of the soil. And I remembered that they grow under the soil. There had to be like 30 potatoes under the soil that I grew. Yep. So I actually have produced potatoes too, believe it or not.
Well, I didn't know. I only know that because back, you know how it is. I'm sure in New York they did it too somewhere, but where I'm from, in the fall you go apple picking and pumpkins and all that. But then they had these rakes, and you would rake and you could dig up potatoes. So that's how I learned.
I'd never done that before, so it was kind of cool. Yeah, carrots are in the ground too usually.
It'd be cool to do someday. As the kids get older, you can take them. You can rake the potatoes. And then they'd understand, like, wow, that's why they're dirty. They come out of the ground.
Exactly.
Do you have any animals that try to eat everything, or is that a problem?
Yes,
or not?
I have wild they were originally domesticated, and now they're free peacocks that run around my neighborhood, and they steal all the fruit. They steal I have blackberry bushes too that are delicious, huge blackberries. They steal everything if you give them a chance to, and they're like. It's like a troop of them going around. You would think and they're like, for some reason my porch is there they like to hang out there in the morning. And so, you know how you get up in the morning and you're like, I don't have my contact lenses in, and I go to the window to look out, see how it is, and there's like a peacock in my face, and ah! And then there's one peacock, a female, that thinks the top of my BMW X7 is a nest. It's in my garage on the top of that, and my kids are throwing bread up to it, which means it's never going to leave, So I'm just waiting for one day I come out here and there's going to be like a nest of eggs there and stuff like that. So
it's just so funny how your life is so different than what you would have described it of 10 years ago.
And the funny thing is, this is the kind of, I love animals. So this is like my dream. I'm like, my kids are if I would have had this as a kid, I would have probably been a veterinarian or something like that, Yep.
Well, no, I know we've talked about it before, but say I've been to your place a half a dozen times. Every time I come up, even like you said with the porch, it's a nice piece of land. It's just you always have like a little breeze going on, and you got the water in the back. It's nice. It's a nice place.
I'd like to build like my own zoo eventually, there, but it's slow and going. I just actually got blue tree monitors. I wish I had some video. We'd put it up, but they only get they're about 3 feet with their tail, but their bodies are about this big. And they're arboreal. They like to hang out in trees, and they'll eat bird eggs and stuff like that. They'll eat a piece of raw chicken off of tongs. They'll eat insects. They'll pretty much eat anything, but they're really tame. And they'll come on your arms and stuff like that. And they're blue. It's like the most incredible looking thing. Maybe Tyler can find a picture of a blue tree monitor and put it up there, but they're really kind of cool looking, and that's my new little obsession I have now. I'm trying to build a big arboreal cage, and I'm thinking about either putting it outside or maybe keeping it inside. I haven't decided yet, because you could actually keep reptiles outside in Florida because the weather's so good. Oh, you're there. Look at those things. I don't know if Anthony can see it, but but the rest of the people can see them. They're super cool. You would never know that these things exist if you didn't know about them.
Is your wife Amanda thrilled with this new project idea?
She's, I think at first she didn't really, she was like, oh, another. But then I think she saw them and you can't not think these things are cool.
That is cool.
So I bought quail. Have you ever tried quail eggs?
I love quail eggs. Never tried them.
Tyler loves them. Quail eggs are supposed to be. If you ever go to a good fancy sushi restaurant, sometimes they'll crack a quail egg over some tuna tartare or something like that. It's really good. But
is it good? It really is.
Over Masago rolls.
Over Masago rolls. Is that what they do? And so they're like this big. They're like the eggs. And so supposedly they eat quail eggs, which I went out and I bought. They actually have them in the public supermarkets down here. It's like $5 for and they're this big. I think there was 6 of them or 8 or 10 of them or something like that. Yeah, they're a little overpriced, but I figured, you know what? If I give it once a week, I'll give them a quail egg, because the shell is made of calcium, and calcium is good for these animals need calcium, so it's a good way to get calcium into their body. I mean, think about it. We take supplements. Animals need to supplement too, especially if they're not outside and they're exposed to the sunlight and they're eating wild things and stuff like that. So quail eggs. So I'm so enamored with these quail eggs that I want to. My wife said, you'd eat the whole dozen. She's like, in one sitting, they're so small. I said, I'm not eating them, but I said, if we got quail and we bred quail, because I don't like chickens. Chickens, to me, there's something about the way they look. It kind of freaks me out. and they poop all the time. So quails are kind of like, almost look like doves. They're really cool. If I can breed quail, and quail eggs seem to be much more valuable than regular chicken eggs.
Yep.
That would be great. Tyler would be harvesting. I'd come out and be like, "Where the hell are all the quail eggs?" Tyler already like put them in his car, So that's a possible future project.
So speaking of plants, this is an interesting segue, and maybe you've covered this on your channel, but we've never spoken about it one-on-one through all my bodybuilding time, and to each their own.
Yeah.
But 2000 whatever through 2000 whatever, I've never smoked marijuana in my whole life. I've never liked the smell of it or whatever, and edibles weren't really a thing.
Yeah.
And a point of frustration for me when I was bodybuilding was I sometimes I just wasn't hungry.
Yeah.
And then once I realized that edibles existed back in 2018 and I tried one, I noticed I could eat more. And what I was trying to do in 2010 timeframe when we started working together was I was always trying to get my hands on prescription Marinol, which was, I guess, stuff they give to cancer patients that doesn't get them high but allows them to eat more. So, but I always speculated, I had good success within bodybuilding, and I felt part of the reason why I went by other people was I felt like a lot of the people I knew that smoked a lot of weed were they're a little more soft and they held a little bit more water and they weren't getting as grainy. Now that was just my limited experience against other amateurs, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on all that. Did you ever use Marinol? Had you ever considered it to eat more? Like, what was your journey like with the plants in that way?
I probably have maybe smoked pot like maybe 3 times in my life. It makes me feel very stupid, and I don't like that because, in other words, it's fine when you're doing it, but I feel like it has a residual effect afterwards. I still feel like for a couple of days like I'm out of it. And I don't know if that's just because I'm not used to it, but so I never really liked it in terms of that. As far as eating goes, I came from a running background, so I was running 10 miles a day for 5 years straight. And I used to starve myself too because I wanted to keep my weight down because for running, so my appetite is insatiable. So when I started allowing myself to eat to grow, there's nothing that could stop. Like, in other words, even when I wasn't hungry, I could always eat, and I had the ability to just pour stuff down my throat, and I don't have a gag reflex, nothing. So I had no problem eating. There were points where I didn't want to eat, and I would force myself to eat, but I had no problem doing that. I know people that can't do that. Physically will throw it up. They get a gag response going. Somehow my body can handle. So I never had an eating problem, okay? When I would diet, I was, I'm very disciplined, but I hated it because, I don't like to be hungry. I like to be able to eat what I want, So that wasn't an issue for me, but I do work with people who have appetite issues or maybe their stomachs. I was talking to a professional eater, Bartley Weaver, the other day, who just turned pro, actually. And he does eating. And, these eaters drink enormous amounts of water during the day to stretch out their stomach. Rather than just eating enormous amounts of food and they don't want to get fat, they'll drink like a gallon of water at one time. And what that does, it stretches your stomach. And when your stomach is stretched more, you're hungrier because the appetite shutoff has a lot to do with the stretch of the stomach. So that's how they're able to consume so much food, when they're doing their eating contest. So I believe that, maybe from drinking a lot of shakes, I think I stretched my stomach too, so my capacity for food was better. But when I would diet and I would eat smaller portions, my stomach shrunk up. And you try to go have a cheat meal, you eat like, what you normally would eat no problem, and you're full right away because your stomach capacity. So I think that's a trick that you have to work on. And if you can't do it with food, when you wake up in the morning, drink, try to drink, 16, 32 ounces of liquid. Just pour water down your throat. Number one, it'll hydrate you really well. Number two, though, it'll give that stomach a little bit of a stretch, and that's going to really increase your appetite or your capacity to eat more. People don't get past that capacity to eat more, and I think that's a problem. Now, if you don't have a fast metabolism, there's no reason to do that. But for people who have that super fast metabolism, you've got to be able to consume enough food. And there's always that, like, well, am I eating too much food and overstretching my stomach, and am I going to get a distended stomach? Well, for most people, no. But, obviously, when you get to the level of 300 plus pounds, I don't know, maybe at that point it becomes counterproductive. I don't know. But the point is that if you have trouble eating, that's the number one way to do it. The second good way to do it would be to cut your carbs back. So you're in the middle of an off season, you can't eat, I can't eat. Cut your carbs back for 3 days. You'll be starving because your body will think it's dieting and your appetite will come back. And I do that with my guys. Sometimes I cut their protein back, actually, believe it or not. Sometimes people are just a little overly toxic because they're eating so much protein that their bodies are kind of getting behind and processing it. And so if you cut that, like sometimes I'll cut it in half and I'll actually increase their carbs for like a week, and all of a sudden, boom, they're hungry again. So there's different reasons why people lose their appetite, and I've never really experimented. I know back in my day that a lot of guys use something called periactin. It was an antihistamine. The problem was the first 7 days you took it, all you wanted to do was sleep all day. I never got through the 7th day, so I never really used it, but I didn't really need it. But I know a lot of guys used that back in the day too.
And my next question for you, it just popped into my head, is speaking of that contest prep world, and I think this one's helpful to a lot of people. Now, I'll share my experience anecdotally, and then you can explain if it makes sense logistically. So we'll use me as an example. So like a lot of times, my diet with you would start just like everyone else's when they first start with you, within, some variance.
Right.
But a lot of times, for people that don't know, when you and I would work together, once my metabolism would get going, it would get going pretty good, and then you would just kind of poke at it when we needed to keep it going.
Right.
But interestingly enough, a lot of times I felt like I noticed, say a week out from a show after doing 13, 15 weeks of some sort of carb rotation, a lot of times I almost felt like you would flip me, and you would then lower the fats and then increase the carbohydrates. And I always speculated that if you've been burning fat for say 13 weeks, right? And then you take someone who's pretty lean and then you switch the fuel source and now you pull fats from their diet and then they're burning on carbs, that sometimes the person might use their own body fat because that's the only fat available. Does that anecdotally make sense to you, or what are your thoughts on that?
Usually when people get stuck at the end is when I start going anti-logic. I call it anti-logic because logically you would think you would do this and this and this and it would work because it's been working the whole diet, and then all of a sudden the person's stuck. So you have to kind of do the anti-logical thing. Well, let's do the opposite of what we're doing. Let's increase carbs. Let's cut back cardio. Let's shake their body up. It's not working the way, because what happens is the body catches on to what you do and it doesn't want to do it anymore. Now you throw a monkey wrench into that whole thing and the body's like, what the freak is going on here? And it starts burning fat. I do this with women. They're on no food. They're on 3 hours of cardio. They're on maximum fat burns. They're not losing a pound. I say, you know what? Don't do any cardio for 2 days, and let's add 30 grams of carbs 3 or 4 times a day. They're like, I'm going to gain weight, and they wind up losing like 5 pounds. So your body will only take so much, and then when it starts to shut down and rebel against what you're doing, that's when you have to do something else. That's why when people say, it's the same. He gives the same diet to this person and to that person. Yeah, but you know what? It gets changed considerably different for different people, because not everyone is the same and not everyone's body responds the same. So the initial template of how a person starts doesn't even matter. It's irrelevant. You can start with anything, a diet. It's how it's altered on a daily, weekly, however often it gets changed. That's what makes the coach. The coach is the person who is changing the program, because it's dynamic. It's not a static program. Now, I've worked with people. I've gone 12 weeks in a row and never changed no damn thing, and they lost 2 pounds a week consistently, and they got in shape for a show. Why? I don't know. That's just the way their body worked. I would say every week I'd feel guilty. I said, I feel guilty because I don't have to change anything. I said, but you know what? You're getting to eat a lot of food. You're not doing a lot of cardio, and you get in shape. Who cares? The diet worked perfectly for you. But for most people, you have to make changes, and usually those occur more so as you get closer to the show, as body fat levels get lower, because then the body starts to say, what's going on here? We got to slow this stuff down. I don't like the fact that this body fat is so low. It's making me nervous. So we got to trick the body into thinking that everything's cool. So sometimes more food or more carbs, which stimulates more insulin release, kind of will say to the brain, oh, we're fine. We got a lot going. We got plenty of food coming in. Oh, okay, all right, let's pick up the metabolism again. So it's a game of observe, process, and then make a decision. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's very hard to advise yourself that. I have a guy who came to me this week, and I'm helping him with the last week prep, and I'm like, and he was reducing his fat burners and increasing his carbs, and he's not in shape yet. He probably needs to lose another 2-3 pounds. I'm like, you got 2 days left to do this. I said, this every day counts now. You got to suffer for 2 days. And he's suffering, and he's improving. So it's hard. He's reading in a book or online. All right, at this point, you had this many carbs. You can't follow formulas if your body is not in the right place, I guess you could say, you know, and not everyone needs that many grams of carbs or this many. It's so variable, and for me to make a generalization would be nuts, you know.
Have you, since, and I haven't asked you this, I was thinking about it, since all that pancreatic stuff happened or whatever, have you made did you make any dietary changes? And if so, how has that affected your physique, either in your strength or your leanness, or even your cognitive function? What's been going on with that?
You mean with my thyroid, not pancreas?
Sorry, yeah, thyroid.
Don't give me any pancreatic problems.
Thyroid.
No, yeah, you know what? Nothing. And when I say not, if I didn't know that I had cancer of the thyroid, I wouldn't believe I had cancer of the thyroid because I never had a single symptom. The surgery, Tyler picked me up. I was pumping gas the day he picked me up from the surgery. I didn't have any pain. I didn't have any fatigue. I went on the replacement like they told me to do, and I didn't notice any difference in my metabolism, how I looked, or how I felt energy-wise. My friend bumped up my thyroid a little bit from, I think I was taking 137 to, I forgot what he upped it to. He upped to like 175 or something like that on T4, just because he thought my TSH was a little high. And I didn't even notice a difference. So I'm at that. My last levels I got checked were normal. And I feel this exactly the same. I don't feel any different. Like I said, if I didn't have a scar here, I wouldn't believe I had my thyroid removed. And then I got the radioactive iodine, that one pill. I never even noticed I took it. So I don't know. You know, maybe I had very good results and I was lucky. I'm hoping, you know, when I get scanned in whatever it is, another 3 or 4 months, you know, everything is fine. But luckily, nothing. I didn't change my diet. I'm doing exactly what I did before.
Okay. Question for you regarding a supplement-related question. You know, well, 2 questions for you. Resveratrol, what are your thoughts on it as I see it coming up more and more within the lifespan category? And as someone like you that's got a family, you're at that point where you care about lifespan, health span, feeling good, anti-aging. What's your thoughts on resveratrol?
You know, the research seems to be there that it stimulates these SIRT2 receptors, which, you know, have been shown when they're stimulated that it increases longevity. That's, you know, it's the same receptor that will get stimulated when you fast, okay, when you're on low-calorie diets. So it kind of like it's like a fast without having to do a fast, so to speak.
Yep.
I've taken resveratrol before. I don't even know if it's in my regimen anymore. I have so many vitamins I take. I kind of rotate stuff around. I don't think it could hurt. Although I've read that, you know, you don't want, as a bodybuilder trying to put on mass, I think SIRT2 stimulation is not so great because I think it does reduce IGF-1 levels a little bit, which is exactly what they think. You know, less IGF-1, you live longer, supposedly. I don't know. There's a direct correlation. Remember, Steve, I got to give Steve Blackman credit for this. He always says what's good for bodybuilding is not good for living a long time. So in other words, inflammation is good for bodybuilding in a sense. Not excessive, obviously, chronic, but some inflammation is good because it stimulates, you know, arachidonic acid release and it signals to the body to repair and heal itself. Whereas if you try to live a long time, inflammation is not good because that's, you know, can lead you, you know, heart disease, cancer, all that other stuff. But once again, we're talking about acute inflammation is good because that's a stimulus for, hey, repair my body. Chronic inflammation, no good. You know, they did a study where they gave non-steroidal anti-inflammatories to older people in their like 80s, 90s, 100 years old, and they found that those people actually built muscle better when they were on these non-steroidals because they were chronically inflamed. For whatever reason. I don't know if it was age-related or whatever, diet-related. When they gave those same non-steroidals to younger people, they found that it inhibited muscle growth because in those people, it reduced inflammation too much. So what the correct answer is that you want to have some inflammation, but not too much inflammation. Because some inflammation will signal. So that's why sometimes if you eat a very anti-inflammatory diet, like I do, like fish and egg whites and stuff like that, it's a good idea to eat some red meat or some chicken in there periodically to produce, a little arachidonic acid so that your body will, and arachidonic acid we know is one of the essential fatty acids, the omega-6, is a precursor to inflammatory prostaglandins. So you want to have some. So it's not, that's why if you're a vegan, which would be a very anti-inflammatory diet, you probably want to take like the X Factor stuff I sell from Bill Llewellyn on my DavePalumbo.com website, because that'll give you that arachidonic acid, because vegans are very devoid in arachidonic acid, and we know arachidonic acid is necessary as an essential fat for muscle growth and repair. So once again, it's always about balance, and so you have to find that right balance.
I know I've seen on your Instagram or sometimes on when you've posted stuff in the past that I'm assuming there are some people that are surprised when Dave brings his kids and they eat some chicken nuggets or something like that. And you're Captain Health. Everyone's super parent. We know that, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's a guru. So that being said, where I'm headed with this question is I always appreciate how you always remind me how neurotic I am. It takes one to know what that's a mutual love and respect there. Yeah. And obviously at this point in my life, I'm not a parent, but I have some family members that have some of our kind of characteristics. Right. And honestly, they're phenomenal parents. My question for you is, as someone that's neurotic with yourself in certain areas, but maybe you're like, if my kid wants some gummy bears and a Twizzlers, that we're going to do that. Are there areas as a parent where you are neurotic though, where you're like, no iPads after 8 p.m. or like walk me through this where the Daveism shows up as a parent?
Yeah, you know what? My kids don't listen to anything I say, unfortunately. My wife is really the one they listen to, and they don't. And even still, my kids like walk all over us in a sense. But maybe we've enabled that. I don't know. I think my son is a lot like me, but he's also like he doesn't like to listen. With food. With kids, it's weird because kids are weird eaters and stuff like that. So you don't want them to you don't want to make them so neurotic about food that they don't eat anything. So, like my daughter that won't eat any, she's in the stage, because they go through stages where she won't eat any protein. She just wants like carbs, fruit. And she'll eat, anything with carbs in it, pasta, mac and cheese. She will just not eat protein. But you know what? The pediatrician said these kids will eat protein when they crave protein. And then I'll see my kids go through a stage where all they want is protein. Like my son will be eating cheeseburgers and he'll be eating chicken nuggets. And you know what the truth is? I believe that kids can pretty much get away with eating anything. They're like little garbage disposals. They can extract the nutrients they need from that because their bodies are so young. Now, if they're overweight because they're eating junk food, like sometimes my second daughter, we got to be careful with her because she has that tendency. So I got to limit desserts with her. I try to get her stuff that's like a little healthier, no high fructose corn syrup and stuff like that. But if your kids are not overweight and they're eating this food and they're metabolizing it, then don't worry about it. I mean, I ate McDonald's every day for 10 years, and I have no blockages in my arteries because I have no body fat. In other words, I wasn't accumulating this stuff. So if they're burning it, I don't think it's the end of the world for them to eat stuff. And I'm changing my paradigm, because before I was a parent, I'm like, my kids are eating nothing bad. But it's an unrealistic paradigm because kids, want to be kids. And so I find if you deprive them when they're young, they tend to go crazy when they get older and they have the ability to go buy the food themselves. My kids are like, I was desensitized. I had old junk food in my house as a kid. I don't know why. My mother bought whatever we wanted, sugared cereals and all that other crap. By the time I hit high school and I was becoming an athlete and learning about how to eat and stuff like that, I didn't even want any of that stuff anymore. I'm like, I already had it. I'm like, ugh, So I think that there's a balance. Look, I eat the chicken nuggets. When my kids leave over the chicken nuggets, I'm like my father. I clean off their plate. I eat everything. That's just the way it is. We went to a water, what is it called? Sunsplash. It's a water park. They got a snack bar there. What do they got there? They got burgers. They got fries. They got chicken. I eat chicken tenders there. They're probably, the burgers are probably healthier than the chicken tenders because they're all breaded, deep fried. I'm like, at least I'm eating chicken. I'm eating everyone's French fries, and I'm eating their burgers that they leave over. So, but I got a fast metabolism. I don't do it every day, but every day I'll eat a little snack here and there. But like I said, I can do that. If I was overweight or, sometimes I'm always checking my blood sugars. If my blood sugars are high, I'm like, I got to stay away from these fried foods, or maybe I'm eating too many carbs. I'm a little neurotic, but at the same time, I'm a little more lax now because I'm not really competing and stuff like that. I try to balance my protein intake with my carb intake. So some days I'm higher in protein. If I feel like really depleted, I'll go higher in carbs. I kind of go by instinct now, My blood sugars are usually fairly good. Sometimes they run high if I eat a really, really crappy meal. They'll stay elevated for a couple hours. But my blood work is all pretty normal at this point, so I'm not really getting too crazy about anything. I always check my kidney function. I know that's something you probably do too, creatinine levels. If your creatinine's normal, then there's nothing to worry about. When my creatinine was a little higher several years back, I was watching my protein intake. Now my protein intake I've raised it up a lot more and reduced my carbs a little bit more because my kidney function is fine. Now I probably didn't even need to reduce the protein intake, but that's how I'm like you. I'm totally neurotic. I go by blood work. If the blood work is not right, then I want to give my body a rest and let my kidneys regenerate a little bit. And if my creatinine is normal, which has been, almost like 1 or something like that, or 1.1, then I feel good eating whatever I want in terms of protein. So, but that's what happens when you get older. You have to kind of like cycle your eating. I think that's a good way to put it. I just don't think at 53, 60 years old, unless you're competing, okay? Because if you're competing, obviously, a different thing. If you're not competing, there's no reason to be eating, 6, 8 times a day, jamming 300-400 grams of protein in a day. I just don't think it serves a purpose. If you're competing, however, and that's something that you want to do, then obviously you have to eat that way.
Talk to me a little bit about. I don't know if when you lived in New York, you had at least one. You might have had 2 properties at some points, or maybe even other things, right? Sure. So obviously, at some point, you dabbled in real estate, and you have your place here in Florida, and obviously, you've been close with Chris Aceto forever. And from what I can recall, I know comes from the real estate world. So, and he lives and operates within that extensively. My question for you is, as someone that's been in that world, and then, you see stuff on YouTube with people like, oh, buy a single family home when you can. And what's your thoughts on that as someone that's kind of been down that road?
The thing I did in New York, I had actually, at one point I had 3 houses, and I sold one of them that was in not such a great area. It was in an okay area, and I was making rents, but for some reason the town was breaking my balls about, they wanted it to be owner occupied. It was a 2-family house, but they wanted you to live in it. Why they changed the laws after, however, I owned it 5 years. So I sold it, and I actually made a very good profit on it. I think I made like 200 grand profit on it or something like that. And right after I sold it, the real estate dropped. So I actually did well on that. When I sold my 2, so I had one house, and then I had another house around the corner. I was renting one of them out. And when I decided to move, and I sold both of them, it was at an all-time low. So I made a few bucks on the houses, but I couldn't. Right now they're double what I actually sold mine from. So it's kind of like, ugh. But the taxes there were really, really high. So when you buy a house to invest, you have to, number one, say, okay, it's not just how much the house costs. What is the maintenance on it? What is it going to cost you to maintain the house? What are your taxes? In New York, it's really high. The taxes are so high, you almost can't make enough money on the rents. Because remember, there's always going to be months where something goes wrong. And someone's going to pay you rent. You're going to have to kick out a tenant that doesn't pay you for 2-3 months. Are you going to lose money because of that? Because you're paying, $2,000 a month in taxes? That has to be, figured into the whole process. So I really didn't like being a landlord because, you know what? Whenever I let my friends live there, I always had a problem because then they thought they didn't have to pay me. And when I went through real estate, I got better results. But when people are at the end of their string, or they lose their job, or the one guy became an alcoholic, now I got to hire a lawyer. I got to get them thrown out. I got to get them evicted. It was a pain in the ass. So I really didn't enjoy being a landlord. However, I'm not opposed to buying real estate as an investment. I bought the house across the street where I live for here because I liked it. I thought it would be nice to be able to give it to my kids. I thought it was a good investment. The real estate here in Florida is crazy. I could almost, maybe double my money. I don't even know. But I don't want to sell it though, So, and it'll never be this high again. It'll probably go back down. So, what you have to say, why are you buying the property? Are you buying it as an investment or to sell or to rent, or are you buying it because it's something down the road you want to have, because I think real estate is better than money in the bank, So if you can get something low at a good deal, and you have the money in the bank and you can buy cash, I think it's a great investment because land and houses don't lose value if you get them at a good rate. Now, if you're buying high, now you can lose money. So like now, if you go buy a house in Florida now, you're going to pay a lot more than it's worth probably, and they might drop down, considerably over the next 2 years. But everyone wants to move out of New York and they want to buy a house in Florida now, so the real estate's super high. So there will be a drop, and during that drop, if you have money and you want to invest, it's a good deal. I tell people all the time, if you're renting, you're crazy. You go buy a duplex, like you said, down here in Florida, you live in one side of it, you rent the other side out, the other side pays your mortgage and all your expenses, and you live for free. I mean, that's the first house you buy. You don't go buy a small house that you have to lay out money for and have a mortgage on, because now it's better than paying rent, don't get me wrong, but if you can get someone else paying your mortgage and rent, even if it costs you a little bit more up front, you'll make out like a bandit. And then I know people that, like you said, will buy multiple units. They'll take every dime they have, or they'll get mortgages, they'll put down the minimum, but then you're banking on the fact that these people are going to pay you rent every month. Now, renting is good now because people want to rent, but that doesn't mean they're going to pay you, because if they lose their job or COVID hits, people just don't care. They're just not going to pay. They're not going to lose a night of sleep over it, but you will when you have to still pay your mortgage. So there's benefits and there's negatives. It depends on if you like to gamble. But like I said, if you have money in the bank, I know guys like they got settlements for court cases, or their job gave them something, and they went and I said, go buy a house, and they went and they just over the 5 years spent the money on nothing, and they have nothing to show for it. If they would have bought the house, lived in half of it, and rented half of it, they would have something to show for their money.
Yep. Yeah. What I've been doing is I'm experimenting with it now. So I won't know for 7 years, but I'm one of those people that guy Grant Cardone on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I gave him money. So we'll see in 7 or 8 years if I get a lot of money back. So,
I have a couple people that did that. I know a couple guys that did that. I have a snake breeder I'm friends with, and he's big into like getting involved with these guys that have these funds where they buy developments and
they buy complexes. Exactly. So
he thinks it's a great deal. But you know what? I got a very bad taste. I invested in a gym a number of years ago, about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and I was making a good amount of money. They were paying me every month, and then they just stopped. So I said, I'm never investing with someone else. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it myself now, because you know what? I'm smart enough now to do it. I learned the hard way. I'm not giving anyone else my money, because you know what? If they need my money, then maybe it's not such a good investment. Why wouldn't they just use their money, to do it? So now I understand there's people that get other people's money and then invest it, and they're making money off your money, but I get worried when that comes about.
Yeah, because I have a very similar approach where I tell myself where once I give someone money, I have to assume I might not ever get it back.
Yeah, that's it.
Anymore.
Bye-bye. Yep. Bye-bye.
Exactly. Money. So I've accepted that it's gone, and if it comes back, I'm just going to be thankful.
Yeah.
But that's how it is, because otherwise I wasn't at a point where I could buy a commercial building in Florida before COVID for $3 million.
Right.
That wasn't going to be realistic, or I didn't want to get into a situation like that. So
sure.
Final questions to close with today is, it's funny because we talked about it before we went on camera, but not this specifically. You own a snake business, which some people know. What's the hardest thing about owning a snake business? If you were to isolate it to one thing, what's the hardest thing about it that people wouldn't know?
Well, number one, I don't have enough time to dedicate to it. Luckily, I just hired someone, like a full-time worker, and he's been really, really good. This guy, Pablo, and he's into snakes too, and he was one of my customers, and he lives local to me, so he's really been helping me out. But the thing about business, especially if you own more than one business, is you need help, okay? Because you don't want to create another job for yourself. You want to create a way to make money. Now, I breed snakes. I love the snakes. I wouldn't do it if I didn't like it. I don't do anything I don't like, okay? So I really love it, but I've escalated the size of my collection. People ask me, how many snakes you got? And I've been telling them about 350. This guy Pablo counted my snakes. I have 650, okay? So I underestimated my collection by 50%. And now I have babies hatching from my eggs, so I'll have even another couple hundred. So you have to, there's a lot of, poop to clean and a lot of mouths to feed, and there's a monthly expense to that. And that's not intimidating, because I know I sell a lot of snakes, and I use my YouTube channel, my Muscle Serpents University YouTube channel, to educate people like I do here on RX Muscle, and that's how I sell snakes, because people, feel comfortable buying from me, and I'd like to believe that I have good quality animals, and good, cool new stuff I'm always producing, and that's the creative side of me. That's like instead of painting a picture, I'm painting a picture with animals. So, but the take-home message here, the hardest thing to do in business is, if you don't like the business or you don't like what you're doing, you're creating a very, very, very big job for yourself that you're going to hate every single day. I like what I'm doing, or I would not breed animals. And so the easy part for me is the fact that I'm doing something that I really like. The hard part is managing all the different working parts between, luckily my wife runs the nutrition business and the RX Muscle, all the books and stuff like that. And she does all the orders and everything like that for DavePalumbo.com. But it's a team effort. I'm always moving myself around, and then you want to make sure you have time for your kids. So that's the hardest part, finding the time to do what I need to do over there.
Final question for you, because you just gave some great business advice for people. And I was thinking about this from a more personal one, is I know you've talked about it over the years. I've heard you mention it in your late 20s, maybe late 20s, early 30s. You were married once.
Yeah.
Now you're in a second chapter of your life. You have a family. You're married again. As someone that's, does this now and kind of making it all come together, what kind of advice would you give to people as someone that did it once and then did things again? What have you learned in the context of relationship now that you're 53? You would say, hey, this is what I've learned is really the keys to making relationship work now that I have a lot more experience.
The key is you attract who you are. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
In other words,
I do.
The reason why a lot of us are not in this, very few people meet their high school sweetheart and go through the whole life and die, 90 years old, holding each other's hands. Okay? Because most people change as life progresses. They hit different stages in their life. And the person who they met when they were 22 that served them beautifully then, right? The relationship was amazing then because that was who you were then, no longer serves you when you get to 30 years old. And then the person you meet at 30 years old, okay, which was heavenly, right? It was perfect. Everything worked perfect. No longer serves you when you're 40 years old because now you have it. Some people change. Some people never change. So those people, so you can go through relationships, and I've been through relationships and with people who I'm no longer in a relationship with, and they're the same as they were. I changed, so I, no longer attracted that person. So now I'm attracting something different, So I think that, you shouldn't get so hung up necessarily on the fact that you made a mistake or that you didn't do anything right. When I was bodybuilding, it was a selfish lifestyle, and I was dating people who were, selfish too, in a sense, and it worked, right? I wasn't looking to have kids or anything like that. But when I started not competing anymore and I wanted to move on to that next level of having a serious relationship with someone who I even consider to be the mother of my children, you attract a different person. That's when I attracted my wife. So, that's just part of life. And I think we all go through saying, oh, I got to find that person. Oh my God, I'm going to go to this club this way. I'm going to go to this side. No, don't even worry about it. You will attract, you'll find them in the supermarket, or you'll find them in, my first wife, it's funny. I was very depressed. I was in medical school. It was my birthday. My sister said, I'm going to take you out to a club for your birthday. I was dieting for a competition. I'm like, I don't want to go out. I'm just dieting. No, you're going out. Okay, we go to this club. And my sister had been telling me about this girl that she knew from the gym or something like that. And my sister insists on holding my wallet, because I have one of those big fat Italian wallets. I always have, and I had my rent money in there, and I had no money at this point. And my sister lost my wallet. It goes in the bathroom and leaves my wallet on the sink or something like that. And they call me on the overhead speaker that they found my wallet. Oh, they found a wallet, and they are describing it, and it was mine. I knew it right away. I'm like, do you have my wallet? She's like, So I go in there. Of course, everything's in there except the money, which was my rent. And then, so I'm like really mad at my sister now, and I'm hungry, and I don't want to be there. And then all of a sudden, this girl, comes up. Hey, what's up? She thinks my sister's my girlfriend. I guess I had seen her in the gym a couple times. I didn't know that was the same girl my sister was talking about, and it turned out to be the my first ex-wife, whatever, Barbara. And we wound up talking. She gave me her number. I said, I got to get out of here. My sister lost my rent, and I didn't even care. I could care less to meet anyone on that particular day. Usually you're out looking. I had that, I don't give a shit attitude. I just want to get out of here. I'm hungry. It was the last thing. And that's how it happens, And so, yep. You attract who you are. And it worked. I was with her for 8 years, something like that. So, yep. But the point is that I think people try too hard, and then they try to go back and analyze, what did I do wrong? Well, you know what? You probably did nothing wrong. That's who you were. You change who you are, you attract someone different.
Yep. Final question for you. I keep saying it, but now I got to work in one more because I'm just fascinated to hear your answer. So You have 3 kids now, so you're like a professional baby making factory over there. Was going from 2 to 3 hard, or was it just business as usual? I've always heard 1's like, wow, this is a change. 2, you're like a crew, and then 3, what's 3 like? Is it any different?
3 was harder, because then I really had to take a really, really active role because obviously my wife couldn't handle 3 kids, and she's with the baby, and so I had to really be available a lot more to watch the other 2 kids. And there's definitely, the more you have, the higher the level of responsibility. And try taking 3 of those kids out with you. If my wife and I weren't together, they would be, my son's everywhere. They're running around like lunatics. It absolutely is, but it's good. I to be honest with you, I really wouldn't. I know my wife wants more. Would say she would want more. I don't want any more. I think 3 is great, and this is not the reason that I don't want more kids. It's just that I think when you get too many, it's like you start neglecting some of them. And I don't want to ever, I want them all to feel like they got my attention, even though they're super jealous over, if this one gets this and this one doesn't get that, and I want to go with daddy, and that kind of stuff. But it does get more complicated. I think 3 is ideal right now, and we have 3 bedrooms upstairs, so
Yeah.
I don't want to start doubling up, kids into bedrooms. And stuff
everyone 12 years old lives in the house across the street.
Plus I'm 50. Plus I'm 50. My wife's young. I'm 53. I don't want to be 90 and be taking my kid to graduation.
Well, I recently heard like Clint Eastwood, of course, super famous. His son Scott Eastwood, I think he had it when he was like 7.
Oh,
so,
I believe it. Yeah, I believe it. Yeah. Some of these guys had some. Michael Douglas, didn't he also have kids later?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
with Catherine Zeta-Jones.
So there you go. You're like the bodybuilding version of Clint Eastwood. There we go.
Well, I always say it's funny. Chris Aceto has a young kid. He's got 2 grown teenagers, but he's got 2 young ones too. So I'm like, he's got 4, and they're all boys. So because they were trying to go for the girl, and they haven't got the girl. So
yeah. Well, that's good. Well, I think that's what we're going to close with here today, Dave. So thanks for, as always, making the time and educating the listeners. So until next time, we're out.